Hi folks, so here we are. It's a slightly cooler day today, not quite so sunny, a little bit windy. But we're going to talk about trees and have a look around the farm and see what we've got growing here. I wanted to show you this one. This is a Victoria plum tree that we planted about 10 years ago here in the hen run. And a lot of people are getting interested in planting trees in their back garden. So if you have a south facing or perhaps westerly facing wall, a plum tree is great. You can pin it back against the wall, it gets full sunlight, and they say the Irish conditions are great for growing either plum, pear or even apple as well. We're going to head up the farm now. We're going to look for a good spot to plant a native Irish tree, and we're going to leave this to the hens. Okay, so here we are, and we're going to plant a Scotch Pine. It's the growing time in the year, so you have to plant a tree that's already potted. So if you're planting a tree from say November through to March, you can plant a bare root tree. They're basically trees that are dormant, they're asleep, so they don't need any earth in their roots, and you just pop them into the ground. And the good thing about them is they're pretty cheap to buy, so you can buy bundles of them and maybe share them amongst neighbours or whatever. But this time of year, because the growth is here, it has to be a potted tree. Here we go, this is the Scotch Pine. Potted this guy up during the winter, so he's ready to go. And the main thing is, try and get as much earth out with the roots as possible. So we're just going to turn him over. Hopefully, yeah, there we are. That's quite nice. Try and keep that earth on the roots. Pop him in the ground. Okay, so the hole is just a little bit deep. So I'm just going to pull him up slightly, and then get that earth in around him. Press him down, and then get some more earth in there again. So it's like you're almost putting him to bed. You got good and firm soil around him. Then what I do is I get the sod that was on top and I just put it upside down, and that'll keep the weeds down for a while. Because you want to give him every chance he has to get ahead of the weeds. Yeah, what I love about Scotch Pine is they're one of the three native conifers to Ireland. So you have yew trees, the juniper and the Scotch Pine. And Scotch Pine are really great for nature. They attract red squirrels, pine martens and lots of insects. So he's a really good guy for biodiversity. They're hardy trees and they grow into beautiful specimens. We're going to look at a few there. Another part of the farm that are mature trees, but the last thing we need to do now, we've got him in the ground, we firmed him up, and then you've got to give him a good old water, and that should set him up. So right around, give him a good soak in there. So I'll come back here in about 4 or 5 weeks time, because the grass will have all grown up. Just pull the grass back again and let the light into the tree. So he wants every chance to get going, especially in his first year. They want to get up and get ahead of all the weeds. Okay, so here's a few trees I've been planting last winter, so they're just over a year old. These are all really good for biodiversity. This is whitethorn. You see a lot of these in hedges around the countryside. Great for bees in the spring, and then birds eat the berries in the autumn. So that's the thorn. This is a mountain ash. It's also known as a rowan. Again, it produces a lot of berries. Unfortunately, the deer have been in here and eaten the top off them, and we have this guard here. That's just to stop the hares eating the bark and give them a good chance in life to get going. So this is the third type of tree we planted here. This is a wild cherry. The birds absolutely love the cherries. They usually ripen in about August. You see the birds come down, and within a day or two every cherry is picked clean off the tree. So you might think about planting these in your back garden too. Okay, so here's the Scotch Pine that we planted 20 years ago. So you get some idea how much they grow in 20 years. That's, I'd say, about maybe 10 to 15 meters high. And when they're fully mature, they grow to about 30 meters high, and they can live for 300 years. And if you really want to see great specimens of Scotch Pine, if you're ever walking along the upper lake in Glendalough, just along the lake shore there are some fantastic old Scotch Pine trees. Good way of recognising the Scotch Pine, their needles always grow in clumps of 2. So there's always a pair of needles wherever they're coming out of the branch. And then if you look at the cones, this cone would have grown last year, and then you had this year's growth of cones coming here. So they're a beautiful tree. And in fact, in the old Gaelic times, these trees were so important that in Breton law, if you were to cut down your neighbour's Scotch Pine tree, there was a serious punishment waiting for you, insofar as you'd probably lose a cow or 2. So they were really protected in the olden times, and that shows you the importance. The sap that you sometimes see coming out of the trunk of a Scotch Pine, that was used in the olden days to make boats watertight. It was a pitch, and it was also used as a glue. And the trees are so strong that the trunk was often used as a mast to carry the sails in old sailing boats. So they're a fantastic tree with a lot of different uses, as well as being good for nature. Okay, so this is a Scotch Pine tree that fell down last winter up the farm, and we excavated it. We tried to get as much of the roots as possible, and we brought it back, and we now have it hanging here in Soearth Studios. It's a really great example because you get the 2 types of roots. You have the tap root going straight down, which anchors the tree. Often you see Scotch Pine grow on the sides of mountains, perhaps in Kerry or Wicklow, and you're wondering, how do they stay upright? This is the key, the tap root. And then you have the lateral roots. They only go down about maybe a maximum 2 feet into the soil. It's 360 degrees right around the tree, and they collect the nutrients out of the soil. So they're collecting nutrients and oxygen out of the soil and pumping it up the trunk. When you're planting a tree or a shrub, it's important that you don't plant them in saturated soil, because trees like to have air in the soil for them to breathe, as it were. And the other thing that's really interesting about trees and forests is there's a whole lot of stuff going on underneath your feet when you walk across the forest floor. There's a lot of fungus working down there, and they're interacting with the trees. And it's like a super highway underneath our feet that we're just discovering. And if you're interested in finding out more about that, you should look up the Wood Wide Web. But this is a great example of the Scotch Pine, and we just love it. I think we're all coming to realise the importance of trees, and how when we plant a tree now, it's not just for us, but it's also for future generations, just as we've enjoyed the trees that previous generations have planted.